Okay. Wow. It's finally time. I have been due to read this article, this manifesto, for a long time, since before it was written. Since it was a twinkle in Rob's eye, it's been on my theoretical to-do list. So now that I'm done with Sasha's article, now that I'm done reading Deep Okayness, it is finally time for the Ungated Manifesto. Um, I suppose, just for transparency's sake, I will say that I know Rob very well. We have done the Connection course together by Joe Hudson. So, unlike when I read Sasha's piece, and I didn't know Sasha, and I still haven't ever talked to him directly or met him, Rob and I are pretty opposite of that. So yeah, that will influence how I read this, and I guess I didn't want to pretend like that wasn't a thing. I know Rob, I love Rob, and I'm excited to finally give the attention to the manifesto that it deserves, because I know he worked really fucking hard on this, and he poured himself into it. He's proud as fuck of this, which I hope it's not. Uh, I hope it's not too much of me to say, but he has told me that, unlike many of the things that he writes and creates, which sometimes, like, immediately upon publishing, he suddenly starts to feel not so proud of anymore. This has retained its value in his mind. He's remained extremely happy with this piece of work in the however long months. I don't. There's not a date on this. Since he put it out, so that's a that's a very special thing. So, yeah. Let's see. I'm I'm gonna try something different with these readings than I did with Sasha's article, because I was listening back to one of my videos the other day while washing dishes, and I was like, it would be nice if you could listen to these videos without having to sit down and watch them, because as videos, they're pretty damn boring. It's just text on a screen. So I thought that I might experiment with actually reading the writing itself, not just talking about it. And partially, I want to do that because I love writing, and I love studying writing, and I love more and more and more. I mean, I don't really write anymore. I'm more prolific than ever, but I don't really write anymore because I speak, I dictate, and I'm a huge Eugene Gendlin nerd, as you may know, and the use of the voice, the power of the voice in expressing ourselves, in helping us discover the truth of what we feel and what we think, is immense. And so I think that reading the writing, one, gives more power to it, two, gives me the ability to sort of like take it in more, and and feel it more, and also to think about the writing more clearly, because when you try to speak the written word, that's when you can tell most clearly whether it's, like clear. Because if you stumble, uh, then you know that's due for a rewrite. So hopefully, hopefully, having said that, I'm not trying to set Rob up for anything. He's a fucking fantastic writer. So hopefully there will be no stumbling. But if there is, who cares? Rob is way more of a perfectionist than me. So if there is stumbling, I do not hold it against him, and I hope that he doesn't hold it against himself. So, yeah, with that, I guess let's begin. I'm gonna this is a pretty long piece, so I am gonna do this in chunks. Oop. Where's the timer? And I'll just go for 30 minutes and see where we're at. So, yeah, I do have a iced coffee with me, so if you hear that noise, that's what that is. Don't freak out, and let's go. All right, so this is the Ungated Manifesto by Rob Hardy on Ungated Media, the pattern and the battle for the soul of the internet. And I have been asked to read this first paragraph, at least, in a dramatic fashion. So let's see what I can do. Brothers, sisters, fellow creators, artists, and media professionals, we are gathered here today on this webpage to discuss the pattern. Once you see it, there is no unseeing it. But it is urgent that we open our eyes. Like a wildfire after years of drought, the pattern is ripping through our digital commons and seeping into the hearts and minds of humanity. The pattern is stifling our creative potential. It is poisoning our culture, and it is standing in the way of our ability to live well and flourish. Okay, so I don't really know how to do this in a way where it's going to be obvious when I'm talking and when I'm reading, but we'll see how it goes. In future videos, I might adjust how this works, but since I know Rob, I feel like I can joke around a little more. This is obviously very dramatic. And it's exciting. It's exciting. I mean, it is a manifesto, right? Manifestos are meant to be dramatic. I don't really know how to talk about the drama of it right now. I don't know, like, if the drama or the level of drama will continue throughout this piece. One thing that Rob and I have joked about is that he does have a taste for flourish. Oh, hey, that's the last word of the paragraph too. So yeah, I don't know. Like, the truth is that, like, when he first shared the draft of this with me, or I forget what it was, but he shared some of this with me way back, and I was a little bit unsure about the liturgical nature of it, just because I mean I just don't tend to speak like that, and it's one of my, I don't know, insecurities, I guess. Of Unfortunately, it's easier for me to criticize that kind of like ambitious way of speaking about an idea. I wish it were otherwise, and that is something that I intend to work on, and maybe something that I will address within Shift 30 for 30 in July. But I don't know. Let's keep going. For what it was, it's beautiful, right? Like, this is something that could be spoken from a stage. And considering that it's a manifesto, considering that that's the title of it is the manifesto, it's very, very well done. And there were no stumbles. Smooth as a baby's bottom. All right. I'm going to read. In the chapters to come, I will share my understanding of what the pattern is, along with the story of how I, Rob Hardy, became so intimately acquainted with it. I will also share how I believe we can win this battle and restore the creative soul of the internet. I don't know if you know this about Rob, but Rob has a background in filmmaking. And so it just occurred to me as I was reading this, like you, Rob, has a lot of practice and experience in creating narrative, story building, putting things together in a way that lends itself to film. And I think you can see that in his writing. I, on the other hand, have a background in like professionally at least, like hardcore direct response, internet marketing, and copywriting. Drama is generally frowned upon. Cleverness is generally frowned upon. Writing in such a way that the writing is invisible is a virtue where I come from. Plain speech. So that's sort of where I come from, and so like reading Rob's writing is always a fun and interesting thing because it is so different from how I tend to write and speak. Like even just like this, right? The naming of it, the pattern. Like I personally, I think it's also a sign of my lingering discomfort with much of what I learned and have had to do in marketing, and my resistance to doing it outside of that realm, outside of work. It's like I just still shy away from like actually doing things like naming an idea. It is a very powerful thing to name an idea. It makes it sticky. It makes it memorable. It makes it into a concept, right? Giving it a name. I tend not to do that for my own reasons. And there is a part of me, I will admit, that's sort of like critical of this, of Rob having done it, but nonetheless, I think it's just like with Sasha's article, deep okayness, right? Giving it a name, giving it a powerful, easy to remember, sticky name gives these pieces punch in a way that the things that I write do not have. So, respect. But yeah, like when I said earlier, ambitious, like very ambitious in the way dramatic, battle, right? It's metaphorical. Restore the creative soul of the internet. Like, it's an ambitious way of speaking about it. But I guess I could say it's an aggrandizement of it, but at the same time it's not. In a way it maybe it is, but like at the same time it's not. Like that is what this is about. Rob really fucking believes this stuff. Um and I don't say that in a way like to call him a fanatic. Like this is what he has seen throughout his career, and like this piece of writing is the the peak of his articulation of what he's been thinking about and feeling for like half a decade or more. So while there may be a part of me that thinks like, oh, this is kind of aggrandizing of an idea, like at the same time it's not. Like it's amazing that he feels so strongly about this. And obviously I haven't gotten through much of it yet, so I can't yet really like say that I've got on board fully, but it seems to have had that effect on the people who've read it, you know? So Rob's passion comes through, and that is a beautiful thing. And I think I do very much, I mean, just having talked to Rob about this article and about his ideas, like I think I do very much agree with pretty much everything in here. I mean, we'll see in particular as we go along, but I will just say that to begin with. Like, I don't think that Rob and I are that far off. So I really hope that nothing I'm saying is coming across as like critical. Yeah, there are parts of me that are, you know, not cheerleaders all the time, but I'm fucking here for Rob. Just making sure that it's still recording. Okay, so part 1. The pattern emerges. I first noticed the pattern in the summer of 2014. At the time, I was writing for one of the internet's largest filmmaking blogs and making a good living with it. Okay, so if you didn't know it about the filmmaking stuff, you knew it one paragraph later. Like all blogs of that era, the site made most of its money from advertising. As contracted writers, generating page views was our mandate. Not only did the site depend on our ability to drive traffic, but so did our paycheck. We only got paid if we got results. And we did that through 2 primary tools: aggregation and clickbait. Okay, so I still am not ready to really talk about in any concrete way my work background, where I've worked, who I've worked with. But suffice to say, I too come from that world where my paychecks have also depended on the results. I have been I haven't been like a on the phone kind of salesperson, but I am effectively a salesperson. And so getting paid depends on making sales. And so, as Rob is getting at, making sales becomes your your number one priority, right? And you end up doing all sorts of things when that is your priority. Some of which you can be proud of, some of which you can't be so proud of, or it's harder to be proud of. But yeah, clickbait, generating traffic, doing things that get attention but aren't necessarily the truth, or aren't necessarily the best message to send people, or are not necessarily even in your favor. Like they might be in the favor of your wallet in the short term, but they might not really be in your favor in terms of like having integrity or generating a long lasting sustainable good reputation and sense of trust. Like that's definitely been the cases in places where I've worked is while revenues have been high, trust has been extremely low. So those things, sometimes it's a give and take there. Fly by night operations, I'm not saying that where I've worked qualify as that, but like a fly by night operation, sometimes, those make a hell of a lot of money. But they're fly by night, right? They pop up and then they disappear. And there's not a lot of trust in them. So anyway, two primary tools, aggregation and clickbait. Turns out the workday of a professional blogger has little to do with researching and writing original content, but instead scouring the internet for other people's work. When we found something with traffic generating potential, perhaps a slick video editing tutorial or the announcement of a new camera, we'd write a little summary, maybe sprinkle in some opinion, give it a clickbait headline, then fire it off to our hundreds of thousands of Facebook followers. Lather, rinse, repeat, multiple times a day for years on end. That formula was a money printing machine. Yeah. I've never quite done that. The kind of things that I've always had to write do tend to be like very research heavy, but nonetheless that mindset of scouring the internet for traffic generating ideas, like looking for hooks, right? Looking for things that are hot, whether you know them to be hot just intuitively or you see that they are hot because there is already a ton of attention going to them. That is and has always been my work. And that's a whole fucking rabbit hole. I have various things bouncing around my head right now about whether to share or not. I'm going to wait. Yeah. His use of money printing machine here, deliberate or not, I'm sure deliberate, is very appropriate because that is precisely the kind of language that marketers use without irony to talk about their endeavors. Like that is what marketers in the hardcore marketing circles of the internet, that's what they're going for. That's what they sell to each other. That's how they excite each other, is by saying like, I know how to make a money printing machine. That's not, it's not satirical. That is how marketers often talk about it. That's what they're going after, literally. We, not they. I do this a lot. I've done it always on Twitter of like separating myself from marketers as if I'm like holier than thou. But that's I'm one of them. All right. It was easy work and good money. And my first year in the trenches was genuinely exhilarating. It all felt so new, and for the first time ever, I was getting paid to write about a topic I loved. But the longer I stayed in it, the more I began to notice the pattern, and the more hopeless and cynical I became about my own creative prospects and the media ecosystem around me. This sounds all very familiar to me, just in terms of a way of describing my experience. Maybe I should say, like, why Rob and I have connected and bonded as much intellectually as we have philosophically, is that we very much share the same cynicisms about marketing, having experienced many of the similar things and had very similar reactions in the many years prior to our meeting. So yeah, reading this, it's very reflective of my experience and how I felt about my experience as well. I'll say also, on just like a writing note, I was talking about his naming of this concept, naming the pattern, giving it capital letters even, just like Sasha. Deep okayness, capital D, capital A, or O, whatever, you know. It's a thing. And I'm noticing that Rob still has not really described what the pattern is, but it's like this mysterious idea that this whole piece is revolving around, and I'm feeling drawn forward, drawn deeper and deeper into the writing, being like, well, what is this thing, right? Here we are, we're getting his story, we're getting the context, we're getting the emotional context, why this matters. But what the fuck is the pattern? I still don't know. So, props, Rob. You scammy copywriter. I really say that as a joke. Please, nobody listening, I hope you don't think that I'm serious. In the summer of 2014, I found myself grappling with an unshakable sense of boredom. After writing 7 unexpected lighting hacks to make your videos more cinematic, or this new 6K camera will revolutionize cinematography, for the 600th time, I felt an intuitive desire to write things that were a bit more thoughtful and interesting. I wanted to go deeper into the craft of cinematography and into the psychology of creativity. So I tried a few times. But the lesson I learned again and again was that thoughtful, long-form content rarely drives traffic as well as lazily aggregated clickbait. So there are other factors. I'm sure he'll talk about this, but like lazily aggregated clickbait, like if it's highly topical, right? If it's about something that a ton of people are interested in, I mean, think about your own online behavior. Like if you're wanting to buy something, like if you're in the market for a camera, right? A 6K camera, and you're like, 6K camera reviews, like you'll probably click a bunch of links that promise to review them or compare them, right? Some of those articles will be crap and won't really give you any information, but you did click to them. So you probably won't go to that website in the future. having seen that it's like not really useful information. But if that website is doing that for all these different hot topics, then it doesn't matter that you weren't satisfied, because people are going to keep coming back, just because they're looking for information, and they're willing to like click on a few bad links. So yeah, generating traffic doesn't mean you are generating like long-term readers, and that really is the art of long form copywriting, which is what I've always been doing. Is like, how do you combine that hyper clickbait hook with a very deep and substantial and long idea? That is very, very hard. And when it's done well, it looks extremely easy, and it looks extremely stupid sometimes, and like bullshit, but it's very hard. I mean, if you still don't really know what I'm talking about, consider like infomercials, but online. You know, late night infomercials. What's a classic one? Tony Robbins has done some very, very, very successful ones over the years. Guthrie Ranker is the production studio behind him, and many other highly successful infomercials. But that's the sort of thing that I've always worked on, just not for TV. Okay. There was one instance where I spent a month working on a long-form written interview with a Hollywood film editor. I poured 25 to 30 hours into this thing, and I was so freaking proud of it. But then it flopped, of course. No one read it, and it made less money than something I could have churned out in an hour. So, despite my dissatisfaction with the status quo, eventually I stopped trying so hard. I stopped caring. Part of me was yearning to do better work, but I knew better than to heed the call. I had student loans to pay off after all, and I knew how the sausage was made. So I stayed in that gig, churning out mediocrity for another 18 months. I feel you, Rob. I feel you. I feel you so much. I mean, maybe let me just actually expand on that. Like, the part of me was yearning to do better work, but I knew how the sausage was made, right? Like, I know for me, and I would imagine for so many of us, even if you haven't had this experience of being in the thick of a media business, publishing business of this nature, you have things that you want to express. You have ways that you want to help people, businesses that you might want to build. I know I have for more than a decade. But then you see what are all the seemingly successful ones, and it's always like scammy and dumbed down in ways that like you don't want to do, or I haven't ever wanted to do. You know? Clickbait, thirst traps, right? Like, only the sexiest pieces of content, which are oftentimes the least real and the least substantial, are the ones that get the most attention. And while we want the attention, we don't want to become that. Whether we're talking about like becoming some kind of Instagram model, or like becoming the kind of person who markets themselves in this sort of scammy infomercial kind of way. You know, so you see that and you're like, well, if that's what it takes to be successful, fuck it. Like, I don't know, I guess I just will table that idea. You know, I've done that anyway. Or if you're a little bit more, if you're more persistent, like maybe you stick with it and then you do try to like morph your ideas into this clickbait format, and it just doesn't feel good. I know that Rob and I have talked about that a lot. You know, that applies to marketing ideas and business ideas, but it also just applies to like the creation of content online, right? Like this is something that I've struggled a lot with for a long time, and I've been thinking about it a lot this year. Is like I do want to write, but all of the ways that online writing is talked about, none of it is appealing to me. Like I don't want to just write like how-to articles. I don't want to just like create this persona that I'm this expert on whatever topic. Like I mostly have questions, and I have curiosities and I want to explore them, but I don't, you know, none of the formats that are so often presented for online writing have any appeal to me. And so even when it just comes to like blogging or creating YouTube videos or something, we're presented with as if like the only option or the only successful option is to do this like very cookie cutter thing. And if you're anything like me and Rob, that's hugely unappealing. So, all right, the timer went off. I'll just finish and stop at part 2. Okay. That's the first important thing you should know about the pattern. If we're not vigilant in our defense against it, it gradually turns us into cynics and nihilists, ignoring the voice within that knows we're capable of more. When you're living out of alignment with your values, you can feel it. But in a world controlled by the pattern, it's easy to rationalize away that sense of discontent. When the economic incentives are stacked up against you, it's easy to convince yourself nothing matters. But even if you ignore that inner voice, it never goes away. It's always there, poking and prodding, reminding you that you're off track and that you have so much more to give. Yeah. I had an inner voice screaming at me for the last decade. Exactly that, basically. There's something else I learned that summer. The pattern isn't just a personal phenomenon. It also plays out on a much, much wider scale. All right, Mr. Tease. I guess we will stop there, and I will be left in the lurch until next time. Yeah, and so that's part 1. Next time, we will begin with part 2, the cancer spreads. All right. If you did listen, thank you. This was fun. Read the article yourself. Read Rob's other stuff. He has a lot of really good writing out there. And join his membership. Yeah, I'm plugging Rob because he's worth it. He's got a lot of good things to offer if you haven't explored that stuff. So definitely do check it out. All right. Till next time. Take care.